Good morning. The Rambam today, Hilchos Tainis, Aniyos, Perek Hey Halacha Aleph. Just to introduce something before we begin, Hilchos Tainis, just to note, Masechtas Tainis, which is the Masechta that we learn and we assume it's the Masechta of fasting, really doesn't begin with fasting. It talks about a lot of other things till we get to fasting. It's mainly about rain. And if you ask a person what fasts we have, their response is going to be, of course, we have 4 or 5 fasts over the year. Let's talk not about Yom Kippur, which is going to come up. We have 4 others that are historically fasts that have to do with events that took place in Jewish history. And at the same time, if you learn Masechtas Tainis and the Rambam Hilchos Tainis, that's relegated to the level, to the back of the bus. And not in the beginning of the halachas. That's not the main halachas. Hilchos Tainis discusses mainly, Masechtas Tainis does mainly the fasts that we institute for problems that happen to the Jewish nation. For instance, no rain, dangers approaching, things like that. Or situations where people have been hurt or killed in ways that are not normal, and so on and so forth. So the Rambam follows a similar pattern. And here in Perek Hey, this is 5 chapters into Hilchos Tainis, he finally mentions these fasts that the Jewish people fast under certain circumstances. And he goes through the list that there are days that the Jews fast, Yisrael Misanin Behem Nei Hatzoros Shiru Bahen, due to the travails and problems and there's events that took place then. And the reason we fast, purpose of the fast is to create a Teshuvah mode, get us into the Teshuvah mode. But then he adds another line, this will be a remembrance, to our evil deeds, our bad deeds, remember our bad deeds, and the deeds of our forefathers, and they're like what we're doing today. And now listen to this line, which is really, really interesting. Shegaram lahem vilanu oisan hatzaros. It caused those problems to them and to us. So first, right away, the Rambam postures that there is a connection of those problems to us, not just a historic event back then, but something that has to do with us, and therefore we fast in order to inspire Teshuvah. Now, Shebezichron Devarim Elu, by remembering these things, in other words, through the fasting, and therefore opening up our minds and remembering all what's happened, Nashuv Lehetiv, we're going to do the Teshuvah, and he brings the pasuk for that. Then he finally goes to delineate what they are, which fast days he is referring to, not referring to Yom Kippur, because that's a different type of fast. And he goes through, and these are the fasts. He brings Sem Gedalia, and he discusses what happened. The Asara B'Teves calls it Asiri B'Teves because that's the expression of the pasuk, and there he discusses what happened. And then he comes to the two big ones, Shivasa B'Tamid and Tisha B'Av, breaks them up into halachas, and he goes into the Gemara, the famous Gemara, that when he mentions Shivasa B'Tamid, he says 5 things happened. 5 things happened. And he goes through the list of the 5 things. Now, in the 5 things that happened in Shivasa B'Tamid, he doesn't spend too much time on them. Pretty much sticks to the expressions of the Gemara in the Masechtas Tainis, which, by the way, is really at the end of the Masechta. I mean, it's the last Mishnah, I believe, in the Masechta, or not the Mishnah before that, but it's really, really towards the end. And then comes Halacha Gimel and goes into Tisha B'Av. Now, here he spends a whole halacha on and goes way overboard compared to the Gemara in describing what happened on Tisha B'Av. All 5 things. So some of them he's very short on, some of them he's very long on. And the ones that he's long on, he says things that don't appear in the Gemara. Matter of fact, here he says some things that are against the Gemara. For instance, he brings the famous one that there were 2 destructions of the temples, 2 destructions of the Beis Hamikdash. Then he goes on and he says, and a great big city of Jewish inhabitants that had thousands and tens of thousands of Jews, which is the city of Beitar. And listen to what happened there. He goes into this discussion that there was a king, obviously referring to Bar Kokhba ben Kaziva, whatever name you're going to refer to him. And and all of the Jews and great leaders and great scholars assumed that he was Melech HaMashiach. He was Mashiach. And he fell into the hands of the guy. And they were all killed. And the whole city was killed. And he ends up, and it was such a great debacle, such a terrible thing, just like the Churban of the Beis Hamikdash, just like the destruction of the temple. Now, the Gemara doesn't mention it. The Gemara just says, Milka Be'ir Gedela, Beitar. Beitar was destroyed. The Gemara didn't even have a reason for the story, nothing. The Gemara just says nothing more. And the Gemara just says that this is a tradition we have. And then he goes on, another thing, that in addition to the destruction of the temple, the whole area of the temple and the whole mountain of the Temple Mount, as we call it, Har HaBayis, was plowed over. And that was done by Truns Rupus, the king of Edom, and that is the tragic event that happened there. Now, as a byproduct, sort of a side note, he mentions that, by the way, these 4 fasts are all in Navi. And he brings the actual psukim. So first he tells you the story, then he tells you, what, they are sourced in Navi. I mean, if I were writing, I would put that first. These are sourced. They're not just creations. So really needs to be understood, just without going any further, his whole structure and his detail on everything over here. Okay. Again, it's a Gemara. It says the Gemara tells a story. Just to note that the story about Beitar, the story about Beitar, the Gemara says, is a tradition. Story about the plowing was is also Gemara. The Gemara just tells the story. Now, I just want to note one more thing. The Rambam when he talks about the plowing of the Temple Mount, he writes, "Ubay b'yayim hamuchan leperanius." On this day, that's a day sort of ready and prepared and I don't want to say the word auspicious, but is fit for unfortunate events. In that day, this happened. Now why did he add that? Who gave him the liberty, the license to say that? Where does it say? The Gemara doesn't say that. The Gemara doesn't say anything about that. That's his own point. Now, why would he say that? Now, obviously, he can say whatever he wants, but the Rambam doesn't just say things. If he says it, he has a reason. Okay, and there are other points that I don't want to get into. Now, I want to take us to the first half of Hilchos Tainiyos and analyze the difference between them. And it's, I think, so blatant that it really calls out for some explanation. When you come to the beginning of Hilchos Tainiyos, he tells you that there is a mitzvah to scream out and to blow trumpets or every problem that is presented to the Jewish people on a community or the Jewish people as a whole. If somebody attacks or somebody is causing some serious something or somebody. And it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah of the Torah. Halacha Beis, he writes, and this is from the ways of Teshuvah. Listen to this. Not a word about fasting yet. That when there's a terrible tragedy that happens or something that is lurking on around us and seems dangerous, is that we should do Teshuvah. And therefore, when we scream and daven and we blow the trumpets, that wakes us up. And therefore, we'll do Teshuvah, and that causes the tzara to go away. And however, if you don't, halacha gimel, if you don't call out, v'lo yariu, and you don't blow the trumpet, and what do you say? This is the way things go, this happens and this happens. That's the norm. It's the norm that the world, there's ups and downs, and there's good and bad, and there's if a person says this is terrible. He uses very strong expressions. And this, unfortunately, will unleash much worse things. And he references Parshas B'chukaisai, which goes through that idea that when your person thinks that these are just happenings, then worse and worse comes, Rachmana litzlan, and that's what he said. And then finally, in Halacha Daled, suddenly comes fasting. Not part of the mitzvah of the Torah. Not part of the main thing. But the sages, the Seifrim, Chachamim, added the fast on every such type of problem. And till God finally has mercy on us and then goes back. That you go back, and these days you daven, you do all the things you're supposed to do, and that's it. So there's not a word about Teshuvah, about fasting. Fasting is like an afterthought. It's midrabanan. It's not the main thing. It's like Teshuvah is way before, and here the whole fast is for Teshuvah. So these are blatant issues. To note that later he says that on a fast, which is the minute that the Rebbe would get up and always say a sicha on a fast at the end of a fast, it says a chacham gets up and says divrei kvushim, and he tells people, don't think that your fast is going to solve the problem. You need to do tshuva. That's one of the statements that are said there. So it's obvious that when you're talking in Perek Aleph and Perek Daled, fasting is a side point. So what is going on here? So I would suggest that if we analyze, there are two types of fasts and two concepts of fasting. There is the fast of Perek Aleph through Daled, and then there's the fast of Perek Hey and on. And they have two different meanings. But I would preface it with a famous Gemara. Gemara Masechtas Brachos, Daf Yud Zayin says, Rav Sheshes, when he was fasting, After he finished an Esrei, he would say the following: Ribain ha'elamim, master of the world, you know, it is revealed before you, Bisman shebeis hamikdash kayim adam choytei, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, if somebody sinned, he sinned makrif carbon. Then he brings a sacrifice. And what do you bring from the sacrifice? You burn you sprinkle the blood and you burn the fats. And that helps towards his forgiveness. And now that I have fasted and my fats and my blood has been reduced, so to speak, so I ask, Yiratzam of Anechat should be your will, that my blood and fats that have been reduced, diminished somewhat, should be as if I brought this on the Mizbeach. In other words, I brought a carbon. I brought you a sacrifice. Okay. The Alter Rebbe in Igeres HaTeshuvah, Perek Beis, it brings this and goes into detail and writes that although the Alter Rebbe talks about Teshuvah, and he says, even though the main thing is Teshuvah, but after you've done Teshuvah, he writes, Omnam she'yil rotzen l'fnei Hashem, in order to be able to be accepted by the Eibishter and to be beloved with him just like you were before the sin, lias nachas ruach l'keinim avedasai, to have pleasure, hayitzarech le'evi carbon daily, bring a carbon. And he explains, and he goes through in detail explaining how this all works. And he writes the lashon, now that we don't have a carbon, this is what we do, we fast. So again, and it's worth learning that inside. It's just long, and I'm not going to get into it. But the point of the matter of the Alter Rebbe is that fasting is not tshuva here. Fasting is carbon. Okay. Based on this, I believe that when we're learning Perek Aleph through Daled, the fasting there is exactly what we say. It's carbon. And that's why it's an afterthought. Medivrei Sefer. After you do tshuva, all the tshuva, it's not about tshuva. Fasting is not about tshuva. In Perek Hey and on, and that's why in there he used the lashon Ad sheyiruchmu min hashamayim. The purpose of my fasting is, God Almighty, we're bringing you we're bringing you a carbon. Have pity on us. Have pity on us. However, and therefore it says later, no, not the fast is causing tshuva. It's not tshuva. That's not what it is about. Now comes Perek Hey. Hey, let's just analyze the difference between the two. Before we go there, Perek Hey, the fasting is so that we should feel suffering and therefore bring us to the next step of tshuva. The fasting is a catalyst to tshuva. And that's what he writes. What's the difference between the two? Very simple. Think about it. Perek Aleph through Daled, we're in trouble. Unfortunately, chas v'shalom. Terrible tragedies are going on. There's Judaism is in there's a peril waiting. There is lurking in the background, and things are happening where whatever these stories are, no rain. There's a drought. There's a enemy that's upon us. There's wild animals. There's a plague. There's pandemics. We don't have to remember anything. We have to live it and not forget what the purpose of it is. That's it. We have the Torah. We just can't forget why. And the whole idea of Lizaik Elohariya b'chatzeitz is the screaming out and to call out and to blow the trumpet is to not let us fall into the trap that we should not let us fall into the trap of we should we should think it's some normal happening, or it's circumstantial. It's not by divine providence. It's not by Hashgacha Pratis. It's not divine orient. It's not divine instigated and created. So that's what that's about. Now, you realize, you do tshuva, comes along the Rambam and says, wait, the Chachamim said, you need more than that. As the Alter Rebbe explains, let's be inspired to become accepted by God the way we were before. And that requires a process of kindness. Miyut chelbi v'dami. Take away my fats and my blood in a way that is similar to a carbon. Perek Hey, we're talking about ancient history to some degree. We'll see soon. I don't believe that's the meaning, but that Rambam stresses it's not that. But we're talking about history. And the goal is to bring history to life and make us feel history and relive it so that we understand that we are living those problems today and the reason for them. And you know how you do that? By putting ourselves in a situation of inui, of like on Yom Kippur, where we suffer, we put ourselves in a fast mode, which wakens us up to realize we are not in the best situation that we think we are. We are still suffering from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. It still exists today, and that's why the Rambam stresses vilonu, to us. That's what it's all about, making it relevant to us. And the way we start with that is through fasting, putting ourselves in a state of inui, kindness. The word kindness comes from inui, suffer and to feel the sort of the pain. And by putting ourselves into this painful mode of suffering, of kindness, we don't go and do all kinds of sufferings that people do. It's only fasting. Then we start to think about what it's all about, and that it's all because of our act, because of what we do, and therefore it's liftayach darkei tshuva. It opens up the thought of tshuva. Now we start thinking of tshuva. So the whole different purpose, the fast of Perek Hey and the fast of Perek Dal. And that's why in the Masechtas Taanis, all the way to the end of the Masechta, it's not the same, the main purpose of Taanis. That's not the main purpose of Masechtas Taanis. If that is true, and I happen to believe it's very, very true, not because I'm saying it, but because it seems so, I would like to suggest that is the reason why the Rambam doesn't start with the fact that it's in Navi and that it has a source, because that doesn't make it relevant to us. What makes it relevant to us is when we realize how each of these events still affect us. And that's why he goes into at length details in some of them, because they need to be explained how they relate to us, how each of these events relate to us. And that's why he tells us there are 5 events on Rosh Hashanah, on Shivas B'Tammuz, and 5 events on Tisha B'Av. You know why? Because all 5 events are part of what we're suffering from today. And he goes through each of the 5, and he tells you Beitar, because if he would just tell you that it was a city that was destroyed, okay, historically there have been other cities. You know, we go through the Kinnis on Tisha B'Av, there are cities discussed there that were destroyed of Jews, and it's terrible tragedies. Why Beitar? Stands out. The answer is because Beitar is just like the Churban Beis Hamikdash, as he describes over there. It's just similar to the Churban Beis Hamikdash because of the story that happened. And going on, and when it comes to the plowing of the area of the Beis Hamikdash, again, the question is, the Rambam asks, what does that have to do with us more than any other problems? I mean, the destruction, I understand, but who cares? Plowed, not plowed. I mean, it says, he brings a pasuk, yes. So the Rambam writes, he says that this is happened on that day because of the fact that this day is something that causes, unfortunately, tragedies. And historically, we know of many tragedies that have happened on Tisha B'Av. Oh, so now it's relevant to us already. It's a day that we have to know that this is a day. Halakhically, we're not allowed to do certain things on that day, not just the things that are usher, but we don't go certain places, and we're careful because it's a day that you have to be careful. It's Yom Muchal Peranis. And that's what this very case is about. So I think the main point, to just go over one more time, the main point is that the Perek Aleph to Dalet Teshuvah is like a carbon, because we don't need to remind us that we're in trouble. We take a look out the window and we see what's going on. Perek Hey, we need to bring ourselves into a state of recognition of trouble, and that's tinus, and that's causes the tshuva. In Perek Aleph, tshuva is an afterthought for ritzui and carbon. I want to just, once we're here, to note that the Rambam tells us the story of Bar Kochba ben Kaziva, different ways he is referred to here and in Hilchos Malachim at length, as we all know, the famous Rambam's there. The Rambam chooses to follow Yerushalmi and not Bavli, because the Bavli tells us a different story about Ben Kaziva. The Bavli tells us that Ben Kaziva came to the Jews, came to the rabbis, and he offered to be, and he said he's Mashiach. So they tested him, because Mashiach is supposed to be able to judge by his sensitivity, which is, again, it's an expression, needs a lot of, the Rebbe talks about, and it's not for us now to get in, it's not for our current conversation. The Rambam chooses the Yerushalmi's version that we mentioned before, that he became a leader and he was killed by the Romans. He was betrayed by a Jew who, his brother-in-law, I think is, who basically disarmed him, and he wasn't able to fight. So the Rebbe explains beautifully that fits very well. The reason the Rambam has to choose the Yerushalmi, because Merech V'Dayim means that Mashiach has to do miracles. Because Merech V'Dayim is not the usual. It's a higher sense of doing things than halacha requires. Halacha requires that a judge judges by what he sees and witnesses and so forth. Merech V'Dayim is a very, very high level. Although the Rambam does use it, but that's on different things, not on our best. So the fact that they tested him whether he's able to do that indicates that they believe that Mashiach has to be able to do more than just regular things. But the Rambam clearly says that no, Melech HaMashiach does not have to do any miracles. So therefore, the Rambam sort of, according to his opinion, has to align with Yerushalmi that he wasn't killed that way. We didn't kill him. He had to have been killed but not by us, because we had no reason to kill him. The fact that he's not Merech V'Dayim wouldn't be a reason to kill him. So therefore, the Rambam chooses that story. It also brings out very strongly the why is Kechur Beis Hamikdash, since we were living under the Chachamim, and all the great people were living under that influence of a Mashiach era, and that was destroyed. So that's why it's Kechur Beis Hamikdash. So that's one thing. Another thing I mentioned that it's a Yom Muchal Peranis is I just want to mention that the Rambam could have taken it from a famous Gemara that Rashi quotes, that the night of Tisha B'Av, the Jews cried when they sent the Meraglim. And God told them that now you're crying for no reason. They're going to eventually use it. This is going to be a day for crying forever. for many generations, not forever, many generations. So that indicates that this day became a day Mukhla Pranis. And other points that you can prove that point. But anyhow, the idea that Teshuvah has the idea of carbon, of creating, Tainus has the idea of creating Teshuvah, and Tainus has the idea of a carbon, I think is a very, very appropriate explanation of the Rambam. Hatzlacha, and have a great day.